Hi, I'm Ginger Catherines, and I want to talk to you today about a scoping document that has been issued for management of the Pryor wild horse herd. In many ways, this contains some disturbing options that I want to call to your attention, and I also want you to comment on what you think of this document. It is a scoping document, so it's a beginning document. The first page is an introduction to the horse range, to the plan that it is tiering off of. It gives you the location of the range, the elevation of the range, and the fact that it was created by Secretary of the Interior Udall in 1968, and that's prior to the Wild Horse and Burro Act. The appropriate management level, now we're on page 2, the appropriate management level. If you go down under Joint Management Area Plan, they're calling it a joint plan because the Pryors is managed by multiple government agencies. It's Park Service down low in the dry head, it's Forest Service up high, and it is BLM in the middle and the low country and some of the top as well. So that's why it's called a joint management plan. Okay, let's look at some items in that joint management plan. One that I find of interest is number 4, maintaining all bloodlines will no longer be a management goal. That's really important because it has always been a part of the plan to maintain the genetic lines, the bloodlines, and as much diversity in those bloodlines as possible, because then that's the genetic diversity, and without genetic diversity, you start to see a collapse of individuals and then potentially the entire herd when that genetic range gets very, very narrow. So that is a departure and important, and one I think you'll want to comment on. This would be bullet point 5. Any individuals who are part of a dominant bloodline could be considered for removal. That would mean some of the horses, like from Jackson's line, from Cloud's line, and they aren't dominant by luck. They're dominant because they have really strong genetics and really strong physical characteristics that make them dominant. Okay, let's look down here at this next one. Stallions or mares may be from a different HMA. In the early 1990s, there were horses introduced because they believed that the herd was inbred. But when Dr. Cothran did some of the first genetic work on the range in the early 1990s, they realized they were not inbred. They had strong genetics, and so that's not necessary. And now the herd is a very healthy number of around 160. It's interesting to point out that the Pryor herd for the last 40 years has been roughly between 140, 150 at the low end, 200 at the high end. So that's what the range can support, in my opinion. And they don't have good evidence, as far as I know, to go down to an AML, an appropriate management level, of 90, which is what they want to do in this document. And I know you're going to want to comment on that. I'd call your attention to the bottom of page 2, that last bullet point. Mares that are non-responders to zonostat H, which is PZP, would be considered for removal. Well, PZP darting in the last year, for sure, and perhaps the last couple of years, has been all across the board. And mares have been darted in the summertime. Obviously, if they're going to have a foal, they likely would have been bred by that time. So you have to dart at the appropriate time of the year to be able to conclude that a mare is a non-responder. Okay, let's go on. Existing water developments will be maintained or reconstructed. That's a really important one, and then they go on to list all these water guzzlers because some of these have fallen into disrepair. Some of them are not working in the way they should be working, and there's been very little to zero maintenance other than what volunteers have done on their own. Next bullet point. AML would be evaluated as needed following an in-depth analysis of resource conditions. So those two things go together. Existing water developments spread the use of the horses throughout the range. If they don't have any water or the catchment's broken in a certain place, then they're going to go to another one and they may hang out around that area a lot. And so that area can be used more than another. So the idea is to spread the use, but that means that these water guzzlers have to be maintained and they have to be able to be used by the horses. Bullet point 3 on page 3 talks about closing the range from April 15th to June 15th for peak foaling season. Well, there isn't any peak foaling season anymore. There used to be. Cloud was born on May 29th, and the majority of the foals were born between really early May and late June or mid-June. Now it's all across the board. You can find foals born almost at any time of the year. So there is no peak foaling season, so there is no reason to close the range. And of course, visiting the range is something that many of us do frequently to document, and that documentation has been used in databases because we report where the mares are, if they have foaled, whether it's a male or a female, so forth and so on. And I think it's important to have eyes out there. Okay, now we're going to go under management actions. And let's look at bullet point number 5. It is expected that bait trapping and or water trapping and helicopter drive trapping and helicopter assisted roping would be the primary gather technique. And then it says at the bottom of that paragraph, every effort will be made to return released animals to the same general area from which they were gathered. Helicopter roundups. Helicopter roundups are some of the saddest and cruelest ways to manage wild horses. When a helicopter is used in the Pryors, and the last time a helicopter was used was in 2009, and it was a real melee, and the managers at that time said, never again, we don't want to use helicopters. They ceased doing this, and we want them to continue to cease doing this. If horses have to be removed, only use bait trapping. And then they say every effort will be made to return released animals to the same general area from which they were gathered. Bait trapping, it's very easy to return them. You only remove the young horses, young adoptable horses from the mountain, and then you let the others go in their bands. So if you have to remove horses, that's the way to do it, and it's been done extremely well in the Pryors. Jared Bybee was the wild horse manager, a real horseman, and his assistant is with the BLM still, and he's very capable. So bait trapping, if there's removals, bait trapping is the only really good and safe option. So I would hope you would make a statement on that. Okay, page 5 and 6 and a little part of 7 talk about management objectives. First bullet point under that, objective 1, is to manage the herd at this tiny number of 90 to 120 horses. The Pryor herd in my time on the Pryors has never been at the 120. As far as I can recall, it's never been below 140. And this herd seems to be kind of almost self-regulating in the 140 to 200 horse category. So that AML is unacceptable. It's too low, and it would cause genetic bottleneck potentially in the Pryors. And the Pryor herd genetics is unique. So let's look at bullet point number 2 there. Objective number 2, try to have a 5% growth rate. When I first came to the Pryors, the growth rate was about 8%. So very close to this target. And it fluctuates. You know, sometimes you have a really good year and all the foals make it, and sometimes, like in 1977, all the foals and all the older horses died because of weather, a winter storm event. So things happen. Can you imagine if you only had 90 horses and you had a winter storm event? Okay, bullet point to number 4. And that says gather, which I think you don't have a gather with a helicopter. It's a flat out run for your life, stampede. Gather to the low range of the AML. Well, the herd that we know wouldn't be there anymore. at a low range of AML. I guess they'd take out Phoenix and all the older mares and then all the non-reproducing animals, and they still wouldn't be at 90. So they're going to have to take out from all age groups to get down to 90. Bullet point number 5 says that a natural rate of 20% reproduction is the approximate average. When I first came, they were around 8%. That 20% is agency-wide used. So that's not a scientific number. If there are 20% growth rates, then that's because the herd is smaller than the resource. Horses will compensate in their reproduction rate based on their resources. And so 20% would indicate one of two things is happening. You have tremendous resource, plenty to eat, and a way too small population to fill the niche of the area. Down on that third column, it says that only one foal would be allowed per mare, and then she would be put on PZP. Very bad idea. In a rugged environment with dangerous weather events, having one foal, and where there's predation too, having one foal is not a good idea. Easily you could lose bloodlines there. On page 7, objective 5 is that top one. Yes, of course, disperse wild horse use throughout the Pryor Wild Horse Range. Excellent, excellent. We totally agree with them. Objective 2, maintain or increase genetic diversity. Maintain genetic diversity when you have 90 horses? That's an impossibility, and that's why they have that suggestion here they bring in horses from another herd. Column 3, number 1, they talk about removing fencing. I think that's excellent. There's a tremendous amount of downed barbed wire fence that some wonderful volunteers have been cleaning up. Their old fence lines from when there were excessive numbers of sheep, and then there's been livestock grazing. So lots of old fencing you'll trip over every once in a while when you're way back off of the roads. So we like that a lot, and I think we should encourage them to do that. There is a statement in here about removing older mares who are not reproducing anymore. And that's a real heartbreaker if you know Phoenix and Pocasino, Boulder's mother, and Polaris, and some of these just grand senior wisdom mares. I can't think of anything crueler than to remove horses in their 20s who have lived that long in their home that they would be removed. So I would hope you would strongly disagree with doing that. Thanks for listening to my take on this preliminary plan. Here are just a few reasons why we ask you to comment. Hernando's 3 mares are non-reproducing mares over 20. Cloud's mother Phoenix is the oldest at 29. Boulder's mother Pocasino, the black mare, is 25. And Jackson's mother Broken Bow was 26. She passed away this winter. It's all about family and freedom. The links to read the 7-page document and send your comments are in the description below. Thanks so much.